Hi guys, we're back. Sorry about that. We're just going to bring in Keith to chat to us about Plaid. Hi Keith, sorry about that.
Oh, good. Good to be here.
Off straight in the middle of one of your excellent points. So if you don't mind, take two. If you could introduce yourself, please, and tell us what you do at Plaid, Keith.
Sure. I'm Keith Gross. I lead the go-to-market efforts for Plaid in Europe, based in London. And for those that aren't familiar, Plaid is a global open banking platform. So we offer a single API that lets you do financial data and payments and connect to any bank account across the US, UK, Canada, France, Spain, Ireland, Netherlands, and more to come. So we like to think of ourselves as the easiest way to connect your bank account to an app.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we'll dig into that a bit more later on. But one of the questions and topics that's been huge in media over the last few days, lots of blog posts, etc., about this, is obviously the cancelled merger with Visa. So last week, Plaid announced the decision to call off the Visa acquisition and take an independent path forward. Can you tell us a bit more about this decision and what it means for you guys?
Yeah, I think it was a mutual decision. And for us, it was the same way as you think about it when we decided to get into the acquisition last January, where you make what you think is the best decision at the time. And at this time, we felt like it was the best decision on both sides for us to go our own ways. And so I think we're really excited about the future and the clarity that this brings, frankly, to both the employees and the company that, all right, we're back in startup mode and we own our own destiny, and let's go forward and execute from here.
Totally. Yeah. And as you say, January seems like such a long time ago. But to be clear for everyone, if there's any speculation, Plaid and Visa are still very good friends and Visa is still an investor in Plaid.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So back onto Plaid, 2020 was a massive year, lots of things happening. And obviously Plaid being kind of a beacon of fintech, much celebrated, much talked about. It's been a really interesting and high growth year for you guys, hey?
Yeah, I think 2020 was a crazy year for the whole world. I think it was a tough year, obviously, for the whole world. But I think one of the things that COVID really did is when you had everybody globally suddenly sequestered in their homes, you had whole generations of people and swaths of the population that hadn't been reliant on online banking or digital financial services suddenly forced into that. And so it was an incredibly impactful time, an important time for fintech. And so for Plaid being one of the tools that helps build a lot of fintechs, we were incredibly busy trying to support all of the customers and help with those pivots of people going to work from home. And it wasn't just that, it was also small businesses trying to access loans from the government. I think it was really a year where you saw the importance of fintech. And I think that level of adoption and usage and importance has set a new watermark where I think even coming out of COVID, things won't quite return to how they were before. I think there will always be a higher level of adoption now than there was before.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you. And, different demographics of people being open-minded to open banking and open finance as well, where perhaps they maybe wouldn't have been before. So in terms of so to get people to sort of appreciate the scale of Plaid's involvement in fintech and as an enabler to the industry, are you able to talk about any of your customers or the types of businesses that Plaid would be supporting? So you mentioned one, which is loans products from the government, which was huge. I think, for small businesses, especially like the bounce back loans, etc., were hugely well received and really necessary at the time.
Yeah, so Plaid, given where we are, we're for developers by developers. We work most closely with developer teams, and we actually support customers all the way from a 1 or 2 person company that's just trying to get started, all the way up to tier 1 institutions, the Microsofts and large tech companies of the world, the biggest fintechs you can imagine. Some of our large clients here in the UK are Clio, which is a PFM app that has helped a lot of folks save money over the past year that have been forced into tough financial situations. So we support a whole range of customers, and that's sort of the exciting thing I feel like about being at Plaid and what we bring to the ecosystem is we really make tools that help the whole ecosystem rise. And so 2020 was one of those years where it really made tools important.
And so on that, we also saw quite a few tech companies or large tech companies and companies outside of financial services adding fintech products and services and kind of embedding those capabilities. Why do you think that is? And can you explain a bit more about open banking and the technologies that Plaid utilizes?
Yeah, sure. I think the technical term that we use to call that is embedded finance. But I think the easier way to think about it is we like to say every company is becoming a fintech now, or every tech company is a fintech company, because the reality is it's now so easy to plug in financial services and meet users where they are and bring them those needs where they already are using an application, that you're starting to see more and more large applications start to think about financial services as a useful offering and start to build that in. And I think you can think of this the same way, like what made Uber successful was that everyone had a cell phone and GPS was suddenly this mature product. For us, open banking is the same way, where all of a sudden now you have APIs and you can plug in the ability to transfer money, see your account, set up an account into any other application. And so I think you're really starting to see this proliferation in embedded finance because of that. And I do think that trend is just getting started and will continue into this year and beyond.
Right. So in 2021, do you have a forecast of what you think could be expected, or direction of travel?
I guess I'd see a few trends going on. One is I do think embedded finance is going to continue. So you're going to start to see more financial services products, the ability to open a current account, manage savings, all of that start to appear in other applications. The second thing is I think you're going to see the rise of open banking payments. Really, 2020 was the first year, at least in the UK and Europe, where you started to see real adoption of open banking payments, which was sort of the second part of PSD2, even though it was the more important part when the legislation was written. I think this is going to be the year where you really start to see that show up in mass, and people start to use it and get used to the idea of, oh, just face IDing and sending my funds from one app to another or from myself to a friend is so much easier this way. And so I do think you're going to see this incredible rise in open banking payments. And I know that's something that we're really focused on at Plaid at executing against this year.
And in terms of the the other big news story, I was going to say in terms of geographies, but the other big news story for us, of course, is Brexit, and I guess what that means for sharing of data and different regulatory considerations. Has that impacted the roadmap for Plaid in 2021? Do you have any views on expansion into Europe and any sort of differences between perhaps the UK and the US and the European market as a result?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I guess I'll start with the first one, which is I think Brexit came with some good, some bad, and I think it's still being played out. So obviously Plaid, like most other financial services companies, had to get backup licenses in Europe and set up different operations. So we had to go through that process just like everybody else. I think coming out the other side of that now, though, what's interesting to think about is this term smart divergence, which is how will the reins be seen, how that will play out. But there's a lot of exciting options to do things like get rid of 90-day reauthentication, which currently users have to do, which is a real pain for things like accounting customers who might only use their accounting connections once every 3 or 4 months. Having to reconnect them every time isn't useful. Well, now the UK could choose a slightly different tack to that. So I think you're going to start to see that play out, where the UK will start to think about how do we want to change legislation to continue to embed the role of fintech, because it's such an important part of the UK, in particular the London ecosystem. But then I think you're also starting to see then this play out of open banking as a concept, not as a regulatory ecosystem across all these different countries, right? The US does not have open banking regulation to date, so it's been predominantly market driven. Obviously in the EU you have PSD2. You're starting to see places like Australia take even a different tack, where they're setting a principle around the consumer owning their data and having the right to move it around. And so I think you're starting to see a wave of open banking legislation happen globally, but it's happening in different ways in different markets. And so I think one of the exciting things and hard things that we have to do, frankly, is abstract that away for developers to make it easy for them to build what they want to build.
Journey to doing that. Are you thinking of specific?
Highlighting open banking payments, I think there's a lot to be done in the account funding. It has an e-wallet where you're thinking about consumers transferring funds in and wanting to be able to use those immediately. There's amazing implications for open banking. I think investment and savings applications have a lot of use cases here. And I think you're going to see from us and others a lot of expansion this year as well, moving into new countries, moving into new product features and launches. And so I think that's really what we have to keep our heads down and focus, especially now being a standalone company where you own your own destiny. It's back to builder mode for us, and we're excited to launch some great new features in the coming months.
Yeah, I can definitely feel the excitement coming off you, and this idea of owning your own destiny. I think I can really empathize with why you're so excited. Yeah, definitely. So another question that I had was around. I guess it's more of a clarification. We tend to, I think, when we're in fintech circles, use different types of phrases and different words interchangeably. And one of the things I keep hearing is people referring to open finance and open banking interchangeably. So can you clarify the difference and what your views are around open finance, particularly in the UK and Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. So open banking really has to do with your core checking or current account. And so in the UK and Europe, that came from the Second Payment Services Directive, where banks were required to open up APIs to allow you to interact with your current account. But it doesn't cover all of the other financial accounts that a user might have or that are important for them to keep track of their financial life. So open finance is the idea of taking this beyond just your banking account, but into your other financial accounts. So the ability to track your mortgage rates or track your investment accounts or understand how much money you have in your pension, actually accessing that data and being able to collate it together into a budgeting app or a tax form is actually really hard today. And so that's what's getting started in the UK and Europe around open finance is how do we start to put together either from the market side or from the regulatory side the right specs and APIs to be able to enable this data. And it requires a massive effort from everyone in the ecosystem. Obviously, all those companies, the pension providers, investment providers, third-party providers like Plaid, regulators, policymakers, we all have to work together. And so we're in that stage right now of really sitting in a room and trying to figure out what should this look like and bringing it to market.
Right.
I think this is one where it brings up some of the interesting differences across the Atlantic as well, though, because all of this already exists in the US because it's not regulated there. And so you get some pros and cons on either side there.
Yeah, so taking inspiration from the US, definitely kind of more liberal regulatory environment. Do you think that that is the recipe for success, sort of reduced regulation, or do you think it's about just the regulators understanding what technology companies are trying to achieve?
Their explicit permission, and that you're a pendulum where there's always going to be this natural tension between the market and regulation. I think I wouldn't say one approach is better or worse than the other. But again, I think for us at Plaid, let's bring it into other applications. And I think you're starting to see just the beginning of open banking as a movement globally, I believe.
Okay, amazing sessions and other demographics. This one is definitely really positive. But what are you optimistic, feel joyful about?
I think there's about it is, I think people have been born today. I think fintech is just starting to get people across borders. At what point does fintech start the same way with your application, whether you're in France, Spain, or the UK? And that's a really hard problem to solve. But I think if you do solve it, the implications of that longer term.
The nudge. I'd love to be chatting with you about this all day, Keith. It's really fascinating. So thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find
us? Or you can find us at plaid.com
and follow 11FS on LinkedIn and Twitter.